Alright, what's going on, you guys? Brian here, and this is a bit of a quick recap for some of the action that took place the last couple of nights, or I should say yesterday and today. I'm going to give a quick recap of NWA Power, AEW Dark, Impact Wrestling, as well as NXT for tonight, and AEW Dynamite that I just finished watching because I actually watched the full episode of NXT, and then I had DVR'd AEW Dynamite, so I watched that afterwards. But let's get right into it. Of course, yesterday, NWA Power, AEW Dark, and Impact Wrestling took place. Over on NWA Power, which airs on YouTube on Tuesdays, the Dawsons picked up a dominant victory in tag team action. We saw Thunder Rosa defeat Ashley Vox in her NWA debut. Ricky Starks defeated Aaron Stevens in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Of course, as I mentioned in one of my previous video that I did for NWA Power, as far as a recap, Aaron Stevens used to be Damien Sandow in the WWE, and now he is involved with NWA, with the National Wrestling Alliance. They had a bit of a gimmick for him where when he's being interviewed, the person interviewing him is not allowed to make eye contact with him, because he was apparently in some movies and stuff like that. Colt Cabana became the new NWA National Champion, defeating James Storm with a little bit of help of distractions that were going on the outside of the ring, involving Ken Anderson, Mr. Anderson, I should say, Eli Drake, and Camille, the insurance policy for NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis. We also heard from Tim Storm, who was being interviewed, talking about what's next for him after the first episode of NWA Power, where he lost to Nick Aldis, and cannot challenge for the NWA World Title again. So he was being interviewed. Aldis would come in. This was a taped interview. Basically told Storm, don't say anything you're going to regret later. If it wasn't for you and me, that NWA, this would not be happening, and stuff like that. That NWA was their house, and stuff like that. So it is what it is. That was pretty much it for that interview. We also saw in the main event, which was basically a setup from earlier in the show, that Eddie Kingston and Homicide defeated the Dawsons. This was because of a interview segment that the Dawsons had after winning their match earlier in the episode. They talked about how they're the #1 contenders for the NWA World Tag Titles. Homicide and Kingston, who I believe was last week or the week before, had an opportunity at the NWA Tag Titles, but they wound up getting tossed that match by the Dawsons. Basically, they made it clear that if Homicide and Eddie Kingston made it very clear that if the Dawsons wanted a title shot, they would have to beat them. Homicide and Kingston, as I said, won this match, but it also saw interference from the wild cards, Thomas Latimer and Royce Isaacs, the current NWA World Tag Champions, as well as an appearance by the legendary Hall of Famers, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, who went after Isaacs and Latimer and chased them away and they wound up raising the hands of Kingston and Homicide after they won. So that was pretty much it for NWA Power. They also announced that they're going to be coming to the Retromania Wrestling game, or Retromania Wrestling. That's going to be available in 2020 next year for a lot of the systems like PS4, Xbox One, I believe it was one of the PC was another form of where you can play the game at. So that's going to be interesting to see, how that is received as a video game. Then we move on to AEW Dark, which also airs on YouTube on Tuesdays. These are matches that were taped before last week's episode of AEW Dynamite in Charleston, West Virginia. We saw Shawn Spears pick up a win over Michael Nakazawa. We saw Sadie Gibbs and Allie defeat Big Swole and Mercedes Martinez in women's tag team action. We also saw Jimmy Havoc and Bad Boy Joey Janela pick up a victory over Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy, the Jurassic Express. So those were the matches that took place on AEW Dark. Then, last night on Impact Wrestling, we saw the celebration from Sami Callihan becoming the new Impact Wrestling World Champion last week when he defeated Brian Cage in that steel cage match to become champion. Moose defeated Willie Mack. Michael Elgin defeated Fallah Bahh. We saw a segment involving X-Division champion Ace Austin, as well as Eddie Edwards and Alicia Edwards. Basically, Ace Austin asked Alicia Edwards, the wife of Eddie Edwards, out on a date. They wound up at her hotel room. Basically, it was a setup. Eddie and Alicia went after Ace Austin. They chased him away, and then wound up making out in the hallway of the hotel. Ken Shamrock defeated Joey Ryan in a match that the funny moment of this match was Joey Ryan, his character has where he flips his opponent over with his private area, with his private. Basically, Shamrock, he did it to Shamrock. Shamrock was like, no, I'm not going to touch it. He went for a handshake, or Shamrock offered a handshake. Joey grabbed his hand, put it there, and then flipped him, and that made Shamrock snap, and he beat him with the ankle lock. Taya Valkyrie, the Knockouts champion, she was in action last night on Impact as well. She defeated Madison Rayne. Petey Williams defeated Bhupinder Singh of the Desi Hit Squad via submission. And then in the main event, it was Daga, Tessa Blanchard, Rich Swann, and Tommy Dreamer defeating OVE in an 8-person tag. Then we move on to tonight's episodes of NXT and AEW Dynamite. Like I said before, I actually watched the full episode of NXT, thinking there was going to be some kind of invasion of NXT by Raw and SmackDown. It was basically the OC invading. They moments before the show went on the air, they beat up the Undisputed Era, leaving them laying. They would then come through the crowd, get in the ring. They would be interrupted by Tommaso Ciampa and Keith Lee and the original Bro, Matt Riddle. This would lead to a 6-man tag team main event being made for later on in the night. Of course, for those of you that did not watch SmackDown this past Friday and last Monday's Raw, sorry about that, guys. NXT invaded both shows. and beatdown was basically like they beat down the SmackDown, but then they wound up getting into a huge brawl with the Raw roster on Monday. So that was pretty much there was probably a lot of people wondering, well, is Raw and SmackDown going to invade NXT? Like I said, the OC, AJ Styles, Gallows, and Anderson, they wound up invading NXT. In the opening match, it was Pete Dunne defeating Damian Priest via submission in what I thought was a really good match. Taynara defeated Santana Garrett. Dakota Kai looking to prove herself to Rhea Ripley as far as the first ever Women's War Games match coming up at NXT TakeOver Chicago the night before Survivor Series. She did not do enough. She lost to Shayna Baszler. Of course, it's going to be Team Baszler versus Team Ripley at NXT TakeOver War Games in the first ever Women's War Games match. It's going to be Rhea Ripley, Tegan Nox, Candice LeRae, and as we found out last night or on tonight's episode of NXT, Mia Yim taking on Shayna Baszler's team of Shayna Baszler, Io Shirai, Bianca Belair, and a partner of Baszler's choosing. Next week we're going to see Io Shirai and Mia Yim in a ladder match. The winner will earn their team the advantage in the Women's War Games match. I wouldn't be surprised if Dakota Kai helps Io Shirai win that one, and then Shayna chooses her as her fourth partner. Just because Rhea Ripley, when she was being interviewed backstage and made Mia Yim the choice as her fourth partner, as the fourth person for her team, she kind of said, you know what, you didn't make the cut, Dakota. And Dakota said something to her, but I couldn't hear what she had said, and then she walked away. We saw Angel Garza defeat Tony Nese to become the #1 contender for the NXT Cruiserweight Championship, and he will get his opportunity next week at the championship against Lio Rush. We saw a tremendous match between Isaiah Swerve Scott and Dominik Dijakovic, which saw Dominik Dijakovic pick up the victory. And then in the main event, it was a no contest. There was no winner because Finn Balor and Adam Cole had gotten involved in the OC versus Matt Riddle, Keith Lee, and Tommaso Ciampa match. Balor went after Matt Riddle on the outside of the ring, hitting the 1916. Him and Styles then stared at each other, and then Adam Cole came out and attacked Styles and Ciampa, and that was pretty much it for NXT. Then on AEW Dynamite, the go-home show before this Saturday's Full Gear, in the opening match, it was Pac defeating Trent of the Best Friends. We saw a video package for both Chris Jericho and Cody heading into their AEW World Title match this Saturday. Private Party defeated the Dark Order in a bronze medal match to earn the right to be involved in the Triple Threat Tag Team title match against the champions SCU and Lucha Bros. We saw Jamie Hayter and Emi Sakura defeating Shana and AEW Women's Champion Rio. Of course, this Saturday, Sakura gets her opportunity at Rio for the AEW Women's Championship. Shawn Spears defeated Brandon Cutler, and in the main event, Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho defeated Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page, and that was basically it. It ended with a brawl involving the Elite and the Inner Circle. So that was a quick recap. As always, I am Brian, and thank you for watching.